Hello and welcome back to part 2 explanation video of the enemy. Okay, so let's get started without wasting any moment. Okay, anytime. When she came, she as in the wife Hannah, she came in the first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. So she senses कि शायद उस अमेरिकन सेलर को थोड़ा सा डर लग रहा है because he doesn't know where he is, because so far he was unconscious. How come you speak English? He gasped. I was a long time in America, she replied. She saw that he wanted to reply to that, but he could not. So she knelt down, yani ki niche बैठी, and fed him gently from the porcelain soup. So she feeds him. So it shows a kind of a very considerate and gentle kind of nature. He ate unwillingly, but still he ate. Now you will soon be strong, she said, not liking him and yet moved to comfort him. So you see, she's also oscillating. She doesn't like him, but she still needs to comfort him because he's in such kind of a delicate position. He did not answer. When Sado came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. Lie down. Because he was sitting up, there was not enough blood going into the face, so it was pale. Lie down. Do you want to die? He forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing. What are you going to do with me? The boy muttered. Now they're calling him a boy. He looked just now barely 17. So they don't know. Earlier they thought he would be under 25. Now he thinks that he will probably be only 17 saal ka ladka. Are you going to hand me over? For a moment Sado did not answer. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. I do not know myself what I shall do with you. I ought, of course, to give you to the police. You are a prisoner of war. No, do not tell me anything. He put up his hand as he saw the young man was about to speak. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask it. So he doesn't want anything to do with him. You know, because this is he is like an unwelcome visitor. जिसको कि कभी आमंत्रित नहीं किया था, कभी भी invite नहीं किया था. He has come like an uninvited person, unwanted visitor. And they don't want to know anything about him कि जैसे ठीक हुआ इसको पुलिस को हैंड ओवर कर देंगे, हमारी बला टली, हमको इससे कुछ वास्ता नहीं है, right? So that is how, but because he is a doctor, he ensured that he was alive. They looked at each other for a moment and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, his mouth a bitter line. So he's kind of this thing that, you know, you don't want to interact with me and that you will give me over to the police. Outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sado. She saw at once that she was in trouble. Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore. She tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own country first. They think we like Americans. This is again an important passage. Please, isko mark kar लीजिए. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? The allegation, उन पर ये आरोप है. The allegation from the servants, by the servants, is that these people, because they stayed for many years in the USA, they are no longer patriotic Japanese. So their patriotism is now being questioned by the servants. And because they stayed for 8 years in America, at least the doctor stayed, they believe that these people like Americans and that's the reason they are trying to save the life of this American sailor, right? So their patriotism is being questioned. It is being assumed that they like Americans, which is why they are saving this American sailor's life. It is not true. Americans are our enemies, but I have been trained not to let a man die if I can help it. This is his dharma. This is what he believes in. The servants cannot understand that. No, neither seemed able to say more, and somehow the household dragged on. The servants grew more watchful. Their courtesy was as careful as ever, but their eyes were cold upon the pair to whom they were hired. So even though they were hired and their salaries were paid by the couple, they were just doing their work, but there was that sense of resentment in the eyes of the servants. Their eyes were cold means there was no warmth towards the couple anymore. It is clear what our master ought to do, the old gardener said one morning. He had worked with flowers all his life and had been a specialist too in moss. For Sado's father, he had made one of the finest moss gardens in Japan, sweeping the bright green carpet constantly so that not a leaf or a pine needle marred the velvet of its surface. So he had created a moss garden और उस पे एक पत्ता भी नीचे नहीं गिरता था या कोई pine tree का एक छोटा सा भी portion will not fall on that particular surface. My old master's son knows very well what he ought to do. So you realize that this particular gardener has been there for 2 generations, in fact 3 generations. The father, the son, and also now that he has 2 children of his own. So that's why he's referring to him as the old master's son. So he relates to him like that. Pinching a bud from a bush as he spoke. When the man was so near death, why did he not let him bleed? He should not have operated upon him. He should have just let him bleed and die naturally. That's what he believes in. That young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life. Just look at the callousness, because उसको अपनी कला पर, अपनी प्रतिभा पर, अपने सर्जरी का जो उसका काम आता है उस पर इतना घमंड है that he is so proud of his talent as a surgeon that he saves any life. So look at the different perspective. The cook said contemptuously, with a lot of scorn. She split a fowl's neck skillfully, and as she did it, एक मुर्गी का neck, she kind of just broke it and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the roots of a wistaria vine. So you see, for them, this thing, because they had to consume it, she kills a fowl without having any effort. So it's almost like, this is how it should have been done. Without saying so, in a very subtle way. Otherwise, ये line लाने का मकसद क्या है? The author, the Pearl S. Burke, wants to convey that this is the way it should have been done, is what is being conveyed without saying so by the cook. Blood is the best of fertilizers, and the old gardener would not let her waste a drop of it. Okay. It is the children of whom we must think. Yumi said sadly, what will be their fate if their father is condemned as a traitor? So they're almost thinking that he will be taken, the doctor would be punished for doing what he is doing. They did not try to hide what they said from the ears of Hannah as she stood arranging the day's flowers in the veranda nearby, and she knew they spoke on purpose that she might hear. That they were right, she knew too in most of her being. Even Hannah knew that what they were saying was not entirely incorrect. But there was another part of her which she herself could not understand. It was not sentimental liking of the prisoner. She had not come to think of him as a prisoner. She had not liked him even yesterday when he had said that in his impulsive way, anyway, let me tell you that my name is Tom. She had only bowed her little distant bow. She saw hurt in his eyes, but she did not wish to assuage it. She did not want to make him comfortable. Indeed, he was a great trouble in this house. So, you see, एक बंदे के आने से, without invitation, you see the different reactions of the people. How the doctor reacts, how the wife reacts, how the gardener reacts, how the cook reacts, how Yumi reacts. You see different reactions of different people. What do they think about that person being in that house? As for Sado, every day he examined the wound carefully. The last stitches had been pulled out this morning, and the young man would in a fortnight be as well as ever. Sado went back to his office and carefully typed a letter to the chief of police reporting the whole matter. So he kind of decides that मैं इसको बता दूंगा to the police. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner was washed up on the shore in front of my house. So far he typed, and then he opened a secret drawer of his and put the unfinished report into it. But he did not finish the report, and obviously he did not send it to the chief of police. It also shows that he's not sure what he wants to do. One side of him wants to do this, that him hand over to the police. The second side of him is not sure whether he wants to do that, which is why he does not finish the letter. On the 7th day after that, two things happened. In the morning, the servants left together, their belongings tied in large square cotton kerchiefs. When Hannah got up in the morning, nothing was done, the house not cleaned and the food not prepared. So the servants had decided to leave the house. She was dismayed and even terrified. तो उसको काफी घबराहट हुई, काफी डर भी लगा, लेकिन एक घमंड भी था कि मैं इनसे रहने को नहीं बोलूंगी. Instead, she inclined her head gracefully when they appeared before her in the kitchen, and she paid them off and thanked them for all they had done for her. कि okay, thank you, जाना है तो जाओ, टाटा, bye bye. They were crying, but she did not cry. The cook and the gardener had served Sado since he was a little boy in his father's house, and Yumi cried because of the children that she was taking care of. She was so grieving that after she had gone, she ran back to Hannah. If the baby, agar baby मेरे को miss करती है, then you know where I stay, just call me. थैंक यू, बट हैना डिसाइडेड दैट वो तो उसको नहीं बुलाएगी, अगर बेबी रोती भी है फिर भी वो यूमी को नहीं बुलाएगी, बिकॉज उसका भी एक तरह का नो द वे दे वर लिविंग ऑलमोस्ट लाइक इन डिफायंस, ऑलमोस्ट लाइक कि हम we will revolt against you. That is something which Hannah did not appreciate. She made the breakfast and Sadao helped with the children. Neither of them spoke of the servants beyond the fact that they were gone. But after Hannah had taken morning food to the prisoners, she came back to Sadao. Why is it that we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? Why are we kind of in this dilemma कि हमको नहीं पता चल रहा कि हमको करना क्या चाहिए? Okay, even the servants see more clearly. Even the servants are more clear about कि करना क्या चाहिए. Why are we different from other Japanese? Why are दूसरे जापानियों में और हम में ये फर्क क्यों है? Why are we thinking and acting differently? Sadao did not answer, but a little later he went into the room where the prisoner was and said brusquely, means said in a very blunt and rude voice, "Today you may get up on your feet. I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow you may try twice as long. It would well be that you get back to your strength as quickly as possible." ताकि तुम यहां से निकल जाओ या हम तुम्हारे साथ कुछ भी करें. He saw the flicker of terror. You see, when a doctor says, कि थोड़ा सा 5 मिनट रुको, next day तुम 10 मिनट के लिए रुको ताकि तुम्हारे, you regain your strength. How would you as a patient react to that? You would feel hopeful. कि okay, that means the doctor is trying to tell me that I have chances of getting better. But this line from the doctor makes him feel terrorized because उसको मालूम है कि अगर मैं अच्छा हो गया, ये मेरे को सीधा पुलिस को हैंड ओवर कर देगा. That was still very pale. Okay, evidently he was determined to say more. "I feel I ought to thank you, doctor, for having saved my life. Don't thank me too early." He saw the flicker of terror again in the boy's eyes, terror as unmistakable as an animal's. The scars on his neck were crimson for a moment. Those scars, what were they? Sadao did not ask कि वो किस वजह से उसके गले पर उस तरह के घाव हुए थे. In the afternoon, the second thing happened. Hannah, working hard on unaccustomed labor, saw a messenger come to the door in official uniform. Now, an official came there and she kind of felt very scared. Her hands went weak and she could not draw her breath. The servants must have told already. She ran to Sadao, gasping, unable to utter a word. But by then, the messenger had simply followed her through the garden and there he stood. She pointed at him helplessly. Sadao looked up from his book. He was in his office, the other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. "What is it?" he asked the messenger, and then he rose, seeing the man's uniform. "You are to come to the palace," the man said. "The old general is in pain again." So he has not come for what they were fearing. He has come because the old general, right, is in pain and he wants the doctor to come and look at him, look him up. "Oh, is that all?" "Oh, ye tha." So he says, "All? Is that not enough?" the messenger exclaimed. So it's almost like a bit of a comical moment. "Indeed it is. I'm very sorry." When Sadao came to say goodbye, she was in the kitchen but doing nothing. The children were asleep and she sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted from her fright than from her. So काफी डरी हुई थी. "I thought they had come to arrest you," she said. He gazed down from her into her anxious eyes. "I must get rid of this man for your sake. At least for your sake. तुम्हारे लिए I should get rid of this man. Somehow I must get rid of this man." And that's when he goes to see the general. Okay, so the next part is of Sadao going and talking to the general. "Of course," the general said weakly, "I understand fully, but that's because I once took a degree in Princeton. So few Japanese have. I care nothing for the man," right? So he says, "I understand because मैं भी Princeton में पढ़ा हुआ हूँ, मैंने एक डिग्री ली थी USA में. So I also understand what you did. I care nothing for the man, Excellency," Sadao said, "but having operated on him with such success, the operation has been successful." Yes, the general said, "It only makes me feel you." So this general का क्या है? Because उसको बीमारी है, तो he thinks only about himself. So he says, "It makes me feel you more indispensable to me. I cannot do without you. Because you have operated upon someone who was almost dying so successfully, it means that you are a qualified surgeon and I cannot do without you. मेरे को तुम्हारे लिए तुम्हारी जरूरत काफी ज्यादा है. मुझे तुम्हारी जरूरत काफी ज्यादा है. Evidently, you can save anyone. You are so skilled. You say you think I can stand one more such attack as I've had today. कि जिस तरह का अटैक मुझे आज हुआ है, अगर मेरे को एक और हुआ तभी मैं सर्वाइव कर दूंगा. Not more than one," Sadao said. then certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you. Then I cannot allow anything to happen to you. कि तुम्हारे को कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए. The general said with anxiety, not because he's worried about the surgeon's life. He's worried for his own well-being. His long, pale Japanese face became expressionless, which meant that he was in deep thought. You cannot be arrested. You cannot be arrested. Suppose you were condemned to death and the next day I have had to have my operation. Now look at how he is talking. कि अगर तुमको मौत की सजा सुनाई गई और उसे अगले दिन ही मेरा ऑपरेशन करना होगा तो फिर कैसे होगा, राइट? देयर आर अदर सर्जन्स, एक्सीलेंसी. नन आई ट्रस्ट. मैं किसी पर भी विश्वास नहीं करता. The best ones have been trained by Germans and would consider the operation successful even if I died. So Germans were also the enemies, right? So I mean, not enemies exactly. Germans and Japanese were not enemies, but he says that during World War II, but he says that their mentality, their mindset is such that even if I die, they will think that the operation is successful. I do not care for their point of view. It seems a pity that we cannot better combine the German ruthlessness, yani ki, a way of doing things with harshness, with the American sentimentality, with a bit of softness. Then you could turn your prisoner over to execution, and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. That you are not the kind who would murder me. अगर मेरे होश भी नहीं है, उसमें भी तुम मेरा murder नहीं करोगे, right? So, I could be very sure of that. That you could turn your prisoner over to execution. So that is the German ruthlessness. But you will not murder me even when I am unconscious. That is the American sentimentality. He had an unusual sense of humor. As a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements? I am not quite sure, but for your sake, I would be willing to try, Excellency. The general shook his head. I had rather not be the test case. He felt suddenly weak and overwhelmed with the chaos of his life as an official in times such as these, with repeated victory brought great responsibilities all over the South Pacific. So he was in a position of command, लेकिन उसकी खुद की बीमारी was really troubling him quite a lot. It is very unfortunate that this man should have washed up on your doorstep. I feel it so myself. It would be best if he could be quietly killed, the general said. Not by you, but by someone who does not know him. I have my own private assassins, जो कि ये काम कर देंगे. Suppose I send 2 of them to your house tonight, or better, any night. You need not know anything about it. It is now warm. What would be more natural than that you should leave the outer partition of the white man's room open to the garden while he sleeps? So दरवाजा खोल करके रखो, right? And my assassins will come and do the job. तुमको कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Certainly, that would be very natural. In fact, it is left so open every night that darwaza is kept open only. So that's not a problem. That would be the best way to get rid of this entire issue. Good. They are very capable assassins. They make no noise and they know the trick of inward bleeding. वो अंदर ही अंदर bleeding करके छोड़ देंगे. If you like, I can even have them remove the body. That perhaps would be best, Excellency, because you're thinking of Hannah means he does not want a dead body in the house, and then for him and Hannah to do the job of disposing the body. तो तुम उसको ये काम भी तुम पूरा कर दो. So he's outsourcing his problem to the general. समझे? That the general, you take care of killing him and also disposing of the body. पूरा काम तुम निपटा दो. मेरे ऊपर कुछ नहीं आना चाहिए. मेरी wife के ऊपर कुछ नहीं आना चाहिए. He left the general's presence then and went home thinking over the plan. In this way, the whole thing would be taken out of his hands. That is, taken out of his hands means he will not have anything to do with it. He would tell Hannah nothing since she would be timid at the idea of assassins in the house. People are coming to commit a murder in the house. So she will feel a little scared and intimidated. So he did not tell her anything. And yet certainly such persons were essential in an absolute state such as Japan was. Absolute means complete control of a few, not a democracy, but complete control of a few people, in this case people like the generals. So it is an absolute state. It's like a dictatorship. It's not like a democracy. How else could rulers deal with those who oppose them? Because at that time there was the emperor ruling over Japan. It was a monarchy. He refused to allow anything but reason to be the atmosphere of his mind as he went into the room where the American was in his bed. So he kind of, only reason to be the atmosphere of his mind is that he thought, okay, I have taken this decision in a reasonable way, that this is the best thing to do at this time. But as he opened the door, to his surprise, he found the young man out of bed and preparing to go into the garden. What is this? Who gave you permission to leave your room? I'm not used to waiting for permission. Tom said gaily, Miss Masti mein. Gosh, I feel pretty good again, but will the muscles on this side always feel stiff? Is it so? Now I thought I had provided against that. So now, the moment he asks him a medical question, the doctor in Sadao comes out. He says, Aisa kya? I had thought I had taken care of that, right? He lifted the edge of the man's shirt and gazed at the healing scar. Massage may do it if exercise does not. So if you regularly do physiotherapy, massage, it may help you with this side of the muscles. It won't bother him much. His young face was gaunt. Gaunt ka matlab thin looking. Under the stubbly blonde beard, say, doctor, I've got something I want to say to you. If I had not met a Japanese like you, well, I wouldn't be alive today. I know that. Sadao bowed, but he could not speak. Sure, I know that. His big thin hands gripping a chair were white at the knuckles. I guess if all the Japs were like you, there wouldn't have been a war. You know, if all Japs were like you, friendly, why would Americans and Japanese even fight in the Pacific? Perhaps. Sadao said with difficulty, now I think you had better go back to bed. He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed. Good night. Sadao slept badly that night because he was expecting that the assassins would come. Time and time again he woke thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps, the sound of a twig, tehni, broken, or a stone displaced in the garden, a noise such as men might make who carried a burden. Who carried a burden means carried the burden of having to carry out a murder. Oof. The next morning, he made the excuse to go into the guest room. Itna der baat karo na, the throat starts aching a lot. The next morning, he made the excuse to go first into the guest room. If the American were gone, he could then simply tell Hannah that the general had directed. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there was on the pillow was a shaggy blonde head. Nobody had come the previous night. You had just imagined that he had heard some noises. He could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep and he closed the door again quietly. He's asleep. He's almost well to sleep like that. What shall we do with him? I must decide in a day or two. So he does not tell anything to his wife. But certainly he thought the second night must be the night because he had said tomorrow night or any night. There rose a wind that night and he listened to the sounds of bending boughs and whistling partitions because he's imagining that somebody would enter the house. Hannah woke too. Ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition? कि हम उसका दरवाजा बंद कर दें? No. वो खुद ही कर पा रहा है आजकल. He's able to do it himself. But the next morning, the American was still there. Then the third night, of course, must be the night. Must be the night means that's a night when he would be killed. The wind changed so to quiet rain and the garden was full of the sound of dripping eaves and running springs, you know, the sound of the whole atmosphere out there. Sadao slept a little better, but he woke at the sound of a crash and leaped to his feet. What was that? I must go and see. The baby also started to cry. Wail means cry. But he held her and would not let her move. Sadao, what's the matter with you? Don't go, don't go. His terror infected her and she stood breathless waiting. There was only silence. Together they crept back into the bed and the baby between them. They thought something had happened. Yet when he opened the door of the guest room in the morning, there was a young man. He was very gay and had already washed and was now on his feet. He had asked for a razor yesterday and had shaved himself, and today there was a faint color in his cheeks. I am well. Sadao drew his kimono round his weary body. He could not, he decided suddenly, go through another night. कि 3 नाते हो गई हैं. The general had not sent his assassins. 3 nights he had spent thinking that tonight is going to be the night, tonight is going to be the night, tonight is going to be the night, but it had not happened. The young man was still alive. So just imagine the first half of the story where he has tried to save him. The second half of the story where he's thinking that he would get killed, right? So just go through the entire, think of the entire range of emotions that the doctor is going through. He could now, he decided suddenly, go through another night. He could not. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. Not that he cared for it, but it was not worth all the tension. You are well, Sadao agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food and extra clothing in it, you might be able to row to that little island not from far from the coast. So now he's telling him an escape route. कि यहां से तुम बच के कैसे निकल के जा सकते हो. सो ही सेज दैट अगर मैं तुमको अपनी नाव देता हूं और तुम उस टापू पे तुम वहां पर चले जाओगे. इट इज सो नियर द कोस्ट दैट इट हैज नॉट बीन वर्थ फोर्टिफाइंग. तो उसको वहां पर कोई किला नहीं है, राइट? वहां पे कोई किसी तरह का प्रोटेक्शन नहीं है. नोबडी लिव्स ऑन इट बिकॉज इन स्टॉर्म इट इज सबमर्ज्ड. बट दिस इज नॉट द सीजन ऑफ स्टॉर्म. लेकिन अभी तूफान का सीजन नहीं है. यू कुड लिव देयर until you saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. They passed quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. Now fathom is a unit of length equal to 6 feet. तो वहां पर काफी डेप्थ है. तो वहां से उस आइलैंड के काफी पास से कोरिया की शिप्स निकलती हैं. तो तुम वहां पर उनको सिग्नल देके बच सकते हो, बच के निकल सकते हो. The young man stared at him. Korea is a friendly country for America at that time. Slowly comprehending. उसको थोड़ा सा समझ में आ रहा था. Do I have to? I think so. You understand? It is not hidden that you are here. कि सबको मालूम है कि तुम यहां पर हो. मैंने जनरल को भी बता दिया है. मेरे सर्वेंट्स को छोड़ के गए हैं, वो आगे बातें करेंगे. So obviously पता चल जाएगा कि तुम यहां पर हो, तो तुमको यहां से निकलना जरूरी है. तुम्हारा यहां से निकलना जरूरी है. The young man nodded in perfect comprehension. Okay. यानी कि he understood. Sado did not see him again until evening. As soon as it was dark, he had dragged this stout boat down to the shore, and in it he put food and bottled water that he had bought secretly during the day, as well as 2 quilts he had bought at a pawn shop. So he had kind of taken care of him. Food, water, and quilts, because obviously it will get cold. The boat he tied to a post in the water, for the tide was high. There was no moon, and he worked without a flashlight. So it was a no moon night. He did not use a flashlight because obviously otherwise someone will notice. When he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work, and so Hannah knew nothing. Yumi was here today, she said as she served his supper. Though she was so modern, still she did not eat with him. You know, showing Japanese this thing, a tradition. Yumi cried over the baby. She misses him so. The servants will come back as soon as the foreigner is gone, so thou said. He went into the guest room that night before he went to bed himself and checked carefully the American's temperature, the state of the wound, and his heart and pulse. So doing all that a doctor should do. The pulse was irregular, but that was perhaps because of excitement. The young man's pale lips were pressed together and his eyes burnt. Only the scars on his neck were red. So the scars continued to be red, but the rest of the wounds seemed to have done better, healed a bit. I realize you are saving my life again. This is important. First time life saved, second time again he's saving his life. Very important. The first time, listen to this carefully. The first time as a doctor, as a surgeon. The second time as a human being. Okay? Please point this out in your answers. Not at all. Sado said, it is only inconvenient to have you here any longer. But Sado says, it's only because तुम यहाँ रहोगे तो हमको दिक्कत होगी, इसीलिए मैं तुम्हारी जान बचा रहा हूँ. He had hesitated a good deal about giving the man a flashlight, but he had decided to give it to him after all. It was a small one, his own, which he used at night when he was called for an emergency. If your food runs out before you catch a boat, signal me 2 flashes at the same instant the sun drops over the horizon. Do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right but still there, signal me once. You will find fresh fish easy to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. So he's telling him everything that he should do while he's there on the island. Okay, very detailed kind of instructions is giving, also in order to keep himself safe and also to feed himself. Okay, the young man breathed. He was dressed now in the Japanese clothes which Sado had given him, and at the last moment, Sado wrapped a black cloth about his blonde head. Now, the young American, without a word, shook Sado's hand warmly and then walked quite well across the floor and down the step into the darkness of the garden. Once, twice, Sado saw his light flash to find his way, but that would not be suspected. He waited until from the shore there was one more flash, then he closed the partition. That night, he slept. You say the man escaped, the general asked faintly. Now he has gone and reported it to the general. He had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Sado had been called in the night. For 12 hours, Sado had not been sure the general would live. The gallbladder was much involved. Then the old man had begun to breathe deeply again and to demand food. Sado had not been able to ask about the assassins. So far as he knew, they had never come. So did not, because the general was not well, so he had never asked कि तुमने assassins भेजे क्यों नहीं. Okay, तो उसको मालूम था, तो वो तो आए नहीं थे. The servants वापस आ गए. Yumi had cleaned the guest room thoroughly. वहां पे सल्फर बर्न किया so that she could get, वो white man का smell पूरा बाहर निकल जाए. Nobody said anything. Only the gardener was cross because he had got behind with his chrysanthemums. यानी कि वो chrysanthemums के जब bloom होने का time था, then वो late हो गए थे. So it shows that he was very particular about his job in the garden. उनके bloom होने का time late हो गया था because of his absence. But after a week, Sadao felt the general was well enough to be spoken to about the prisoner. Yes, Excellency, he escaped, Sadao now said. He coughed, signifying that he had not said anything that he might have said, but was unwilling to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. That prisoner did I not promise that I would kill him for you? कि मैंने कहा था ना कि मैं उसको मार दूंगा तुम्हारे लिए. You did, Excellency. Well, so I did. But you see, I was suffering a good deal कि मैं भूल गया. In short, I forgot my promise to you. So he never sent the assassins. I wondered, Your Excellency. It was certainly very careless of me, but you understand it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. Dereliction means, that I did not perform my duty. He looked anxiously at the doctor. If the matter should come out, you would understand that, wouldn't you? That, मेरे ऊपर इल्जाम तो नहीं डाल दोगे कि मैंने भेजा नहीं लोगों को मारने के लिए. Certainly, Your Excellency, he suddenly comprehended the general was in the palm of his hand, and as a consequence, he himself was perfectly safe. कि general was in his grip because general का एक secret भी अभी उसको पता चल गया कि उसने कहा था, प्रॉमिस किया था, मैं मारने के लिए तुम assassins भेजूंगा, भेजे नहीं, तो इससे उसकी patriotism पे सवाल या निशान खड़े हो जाएंगे, right? People would question his patriotism, so he had got that thing against general, and that meant that Sadao himself was now safe. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency, and to your zeal against the enemy. You are a good man, you will be rewarded. But Sadao, searching the spot of black in the twilighted sea that night, had his reward. There was no prick of light in the dusk. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone, safe, doubtless, for he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat. तो उसको वहां पर लाइट नहीं दिखी, तो इसका मतलब he realized that the American must have boarded a Korean fishing boat, and he would have escaped. He stood for a moment on the veranda, gazing out to the sea from whence the young man had come that other night. And into his mind, although without reason, there came another white faces he had known. The professor at whose house he had met Hannah, the professor in America, a dull man, and his wife who had been a silly, talkative woman, जिसके बारे में पहले बताया. In spite of her wish to be kind, he remembered his old teacher of anatomy who had been so insistent on mercy with the knife, and then he remembered the face of his fat and slatternly landlady. A very rude kind of a landlady who he had great difficulty to find place in America to live because he was a Japanese, because Americans, he realized, are very, very prejudiced. Okay. And, they did not like the Japanese, knowing himself their superior. Or even if, it was very bitter to kind of live with the whites. How he had despised the ignorant and dirty old woman who at last had consented to house him in her miserable home. His landlady. He had once tried to be grateful to her because she had in her last year nursed him through influenza, but it was difficult, but she was no less repulsive to him in her kindness. So last year में इसको influenza हो गया था, बीमारी हो गई थी, उसमें landlady ने इसकी देखभाल की थी, लेकिन उस के दौरान भी she was not very nice to him. Repulsive means someone you can get very irritated with. Now he remembered the youthful, haggard face of his prisoner, white and repulsive. And now he remembers the face of Tom. And he says, strange, I wonder how I could not kill him. I wonder कि मैं उसको मार क्यों नहीं पाया. He's asking him the question himself. Because he's not been able to answer that question for himself. Why couldn't I kill him? Because at the end of the day, he was a good human being. The doctor was a good human being. He was married to the task of what the profession demanded of him, that you need to save a life irrespective of the person's nationality, irrespective of the person's status vis-a-vis you, whether he's an enemy or a friend. On the operation table, he's your patient, and a patient, he refers to him as my friend. That's important. Okay, so that is why he was never able, even though he found him repulsive, white and repulsive, he could not kill him. So this line is important. Okay, I'll write answers on this. So I hope you've understood, enjoyed the story. It's a nice story that tells you the larger message of humanity over patriotism, right? And what a doctor is meant to do under any kind of circumstances, and how the doctor manages to save the life of the American sailor twice. Okay, tata, bye bye. Thank you very much. God bless you.